Hi Joel, how you going?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Good.
So, so we're going to start by discussing the differentiation in our each respective classrooms,
hmm Shall we
different ways
start
that.
with some examples of diversity?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
I'll start with the big one. I mean, the first one is obviously different sort of learning disabilities is the one that I first came across, and this is the one that I'll focus on a little bit for a second because this is what I'll be doing my case study on. So my case study later,
Okay.
as we talk about Kevin, he has ADHD, which as a teacher in China, I think you'll be surprised to have any student that's actually been diagnosed with anything, but as I'll talk about
There's
later.
no diagnosis. There's nobody really gets diagnosed with anything, do they?
No, but he
I
was
think there's
born
a
in
lot of
Australia, lived in
underdiagnosed.
Australia for 9 years, so he was diagnosed over there, which is why
Right.
the case studies. But obviously, there's so many different types of learning disabilities that we, especially nowadays, with the when we looked at the laws and things last week with inclusiveness in the classroom,
Yep.
more and more we're seeing people with autism, people with ADHD, people with dyslexia, constantly included in the classroom, which obviously has positive and negative effects. And I will say, as a teacher now, I think children are a lot more accepting of different abilities than they used to be, certainly when I was a kid.
Yep.
And yeah, obviously that's just my first example that I wanted to talk about. That's something we have to be aware of. And that can be a huge bonus to us as teachers if the education is there for the children as well, if they're made aware of people having different abilities, and we can do that as teachers. And that can massively help us, uh, especially when it comes to the UDL, because kids won't necessarily point out as much why people are being
Yeah.
treated differently. They'll
Exactly.
understand
Yeah.
differences.
I feel that there's a challenge in that too for teachers in China because it's not really those kinds of conditions aren't welcomed, and
Yeah.
recognized and diagnosed so much. It's hard to get support in
Mm.
classrooms too. Whereas if I've got a diagnosed teaching learning disability for a student, most Western countries will have ample support or more than what we can get in China.
Mm.
Where my case study is also on a student similar to that.
Okay.
A little different, but it's been an absolute it's been very difficult. He's got learning support now and language support, but it's been a long road to get to that. And he still hasn't got the other social and emotional support that he needs as well.
Mm.
But we can get to that later. So some other differentiation that I really thought I started with one thing that we don't really have, seeing as we're both in China, and that is we don't have a lot of racial,
Mm.
differentiation here. It's very homogenous, isn't it? So,
Yeah, it is.
but one thing that I see here in Shenzhen, which you probably don't come in contact with as much in Wuhan, is Shenzhen is very much a migrant city inside China. Everybody in Shenzhen, if you meet somebody that was born in Shenzhen, it's like, what is that? You're kidding, right? Because no one was really born here. It's such a new city that everyone's from everywhere. So it's a bit of a melting pot. So while there's no different races here, it's 99% Han Chinese, but they're from different areas of China. So they bring with them a lot of different kind of attitudes and culture
Mm.
and things anyway. So there is a little bit of a, it's not anything negative, but there certainly is some diversity in, where the different people from China come from to be here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely can be. And in China, the real difference seems to be north and south, obviously, but also if you
Yeah.
were raised in a city and if you were raised in a village, and I air quotes village because 200,000 people is a village in China, but
No,
that seems to be where the big boundaries are.
that's barely even a village, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But
Um,
yeah, that
Another
kind of.
differentiation that I had here is that we don't really have, again, is racial diversity. I mean, not
Mm.
racial, religious diversity. We
Yeah.
obviously don't have political diversity. And genders are pretty equal, so there's not really any differentiation there either. My classes are pretty much 50-50 girls and boys.
Okay, yeah,
Um,
yeah. I think gender expectations is definitely different.
oh, for sure, yeah.
If I mention something in the classroom about a boy wearing a dress, it's pandemonium, which I think we would find I think that would still be there, especially in America or in the UK, that would still be there. But I don't think it would be as marked, and I don't think it would be such a case for hysteria. But
yeah, that's right.
But
What's your age
second
group?
one. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, what's your age group? Which kids do you? What age are you teaching?
5th grade, so they're 10 and 11.
Yeah. Okay. Same as me. And the other big one that I really feel before we move on is socioeconomic. There's a massive diversity between the haves and have-nots here.
Oh yeah.
And even though I'm working in a international school, so I don't really see any of the real have-nots. There's still a big difference in socioeconomic, kind of standards between the really super rich families and those that are struggling to get into the school.
Definitely, and I mean that can have a huge impact on the UDL, because a lot of the things I see is about access to different resources.
Yeah.
Obviously, different social economic classes will have different accesses to resources, not just in terms of schooling and the facilities in the school, but when they go home from school, how much access do they have to the internet? Do they have to computers compared to their class?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. So you want to move on to questions?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's, no, the next one I was going to move was just like languages, but again.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's mostly just Chinese, but yeah, let's move on to some of the questions. So I'll let you start this one.
All right, questions. And I'll stick with the languages theme then. Okay, my first question was: do all students have English language abilities to comprehend what I'm saying, to be able to respond to any text instruction, to be able to verbally tell me their thoughts and answers, and also can they write them down? And if not, what language support will be needed in the classrooms? Because that's still the biggest as far as day-to-day is concerned. There's still, even though I'm working in officially a English immersion style school, it's not the reality. There's still a lot of kids there that are barely able to say a word of English.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, those different abilities in language definitely are things we should look for when we're looking for differentiation, and the key things to spot for different access. Yeah.
And going back to UDL again, so with UDL, do you have any like that I was given permission by the school to give on any worksheets that they've got to embed Chinese language Mandarin into any of their worksheets, which are natively English, because that was the only way we were getting some of those kids to be able to produce any work.
Yeah, I've not had that. I think maybe in my class we have my co-teacher, so sometimes we'll spend a little bit of extra time after we talk about the group work. At this point in the year especially, I know which kids to go to and talk to one-on-one.
For sure.
And that's a language thing, but that's also like a concentration thing as well, which actually ties into our engagement idea of the UDL. But our next point thing to look out for is different key skills. So not just languages, but I teach English language arts. So we're looking at reading, writing, and speaking. Reading, writing, and speaking. So for example, if we have kids that have excellent reading and writing, but poor oral work, then that could be an indicator of the things that they engage in differently. Some kids engage in stories really well. Some kids listen really well. And some kids like to just, chat, where they don't have the confidence in class to stand up. And it's about maybe how do you engage with kids that don't want to get up and say their piece, because I don't want coasters in my class. I don't want people who are just there and not paying attention, but I don't want to cause anyone anxiety. And this comes back to the Hattie's principles of learning, of how anxiety can affect your performance in the classroom, because I don't want to cause anxiety by telling kids, look, you have to stand up and say something in class. But at the same time, I don't want kids to be not switched on and not engaged in the classroom. It's
a fine line, isn't it? It really is. And I know I spend some time with every class, really telling them some tricks and do's and don'ts, and why it's important to practice public speaking, and why it helps them in their, not only anything out of school, but it helps them in school to try to remove that fear of having a spotlight on them while they're speaking.
Yeah, definitely. It's such a useful skill, public speaking. But
It is.
how do you push someone to get over that anxiety? Because if you push them
I
too
think
hard, then they'll never public speak again. But if you don't push them at
absolutely.
all, then they'll also never do it. So
Yeah, I think there has to
yeah,
be a lot more carrots and sticks when it comes to that, doesn't there?
yeah, definitely. You have to find the balance. And yeah, it comes to each student. You need to find a way to engage them and, you know, let them choose their own actions in a way while slowly guiding them. I guess that's our job.
Yeah. So do you want me to go to another question now?
Yeah, you can do. I'm just noticing
Okay,
the
so
time.
there's
Maybe let's do
another
one more
question.
question each, and then we'll do our case studies.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so probably the main other one, I think that we've spoken about socioeconomic with the diversity. So I might do one that we didn't touch on a lot of that. A lot is are the students all able to communicate well at their grade level in their native language? Because that's not always the case either. And if not, what learning support will be available for those who do need to catch up in their own native language? Do you have many with that problem?
Well, actually, Kevin, because my case study is a little bit like that because really he's ethnically Chinese, but
Yep.
really I would say his first language was English because, like I said,
Yeah,
he
yeah.
was the first 8 to 9 years.
Sure.
And his ADHD is something that I recognize. I will say I'm probably the only teacher that takes it into account because obviously they don't have training on things like that. They don't recognize things like that.
Yep.
And the way they teach things like maths here is just like sit down, shut up, tell me your 17th time table off by heart.
Uh-huh.
It's great for some people. For someone like Kevin, it just doesn't work. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's a good thing to look at. And it pulls into my question, which I'll come on to slightly. Is there anything
Yep.
more you want to add to that?
No, that's fine. That's all.
Okay, so that, yeah, basically ties into what I would say was my last question with we should look at the subjects as well as like the language thing. But if you have a kid that's really good at art and drama and you speak to their teachers and they're really good kids, they're very engaged, but you speak to their maths and science teacher and they're like, oh, they're just always causing trouble, then obviously that's going to help us sort of lean towards which area of their universal learning we need to focus on. You know, this person's probably seen much more creative, and maybe we should use that approach more in his other classes if possible.
Yeah, true. Yeah, actually, that's a good point. And that reminds me of one of my students where I was having, we have a weekly discussion about, children of concern. And there was one kid that I've always found him really good. He really is engaged in, in STEM, in science and things like that, technical things. But the language arts teachers were saying how this kid is absolutely a write-off. He's the worst student they've got. He's no good for anything. Like they were really negative. And I said, well, hang on, wait a second. He's who? Which name? Because if you're talking about who you think you're talking of, that's not universal. He's actually really, really great, when it comes to hands-on and STEM related, subjects. And that was a huge kind of surprise for them too, because they didn't think anything could reach him. So yeah, he's probably an interesting case study himself.
Yeah.
Young Andy. Yeah. But yeah, you're right for sure.
Okay, excellent. Let's move on to our case studies then.
Yeah, that's a good segue into case studies now.
Shall I go first?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so as I've already alluded to, my case study is about my friend Kevin. Obviously not his real name, it's his English name. So Kevin has diagnosed ADHD, which again is very rare in China. But obviously this makes it very difficult for him to concentrate and hold his attention. But also another challenge is that his English level is far above anyone else in the class, because like I said, English is probably his first language, and I'm supposed to be teaching ESL as a second language. So the class doesn't really challenge him. But obviously in China, we have this sort of one size fits all policy where you don't have much room, even as a teacher, to deviate from the curriculum because it's so strict, and it's like you must test once a month. You must do weekly quizzes. You must do this amount of vocabulary. So academically, excellent at speaking. Obviously, his spoken English is fantastic, better than a lot of the Chinese co-teachers. Writing, not so great. So his handwriting is terrible, which is something that always giving him a hard time for in China. For me, it's not important, but they spend so much time on calligraphy. And his
Okay.
spelling's poor and his grammar's quite poor. But that's because he rushes, and that's part of his ADHD. He rushes through the questions, he rushes through it. His reading's also excellent. So the question for me as his teacher, and what we're going to try and apply the UDL to, is what could we do during the vocab and the writing to keep him engaged and stop him really from distracting the other kids? You know, how do we work on his writing? Because that's the problem. It's not his English, and he's not a bad kid, obviously, but he distracts the other kids. There's 27 other kids in class. It can't always be all about Kevin, unfortunately. So before I go into his, like, the engagement part of the UDL, what I've thought of, any questions, or shall I pop on?
Yeah, I think that we briefly touched on him the other night, didn't we, when we were talking?
We did, yeah. This was what
yeah, and I was kind of saying that some of the things that I was doing with some of the, I guess you'd call them the more advanced, you know, students, to give them a teacher role in the play, give them extension work, sometimes give them extension work, but other times to give them a teacher role to help where they can with some of the kids that are struggling with some areas. And it gave them a really huge boost in confidence, you know, as well. And it helped sort of solidify their own learnings as well.
Yeah, I've touched on that a little bit in here, and I would like your opinion on how you think that would work, because it's something I've been talking to my co-teacher about this week. But in terms of the engagement part of the UDL, which is, I've mainly focused on, like, giving them a choice, which is obviously one of the major parts of engagement anyway. I was wondering how we could do this with his handwriting and his spelling. But I think maybe I could give Kevin a choice of what we should do if his handwriting isn't good enough. Rather than me being like, go and write this again, we can ask him, what does he think we should do?
Yeah,
does he think this work is good enough?
Some self-evaluation.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit of self-evaluation, a little bit of his choice of what will happen when his handwriting isn't up to the standard it should be. And then hopefully we can guide him towards making the choice of realizing, oh, this isn't good enough, I'll go and do it again. And that way Kevin sees it more as his choice rather than, you know, as something that he's being forced to do. So that was something I was thinking about, and maybe giving him more freedom in his creative writing and allowing him to write stories that are maybe a bit more relevant to what Kevin goes through. Maybe we could get him thinking a little bit more about his behavior by talking about his creative writing, because he's very creative, tends to normally do stuff about Call of Duty and zombies, but that's relevant to him. That's what he likes. So, you know, I always encourage all my students to try and be more creative in their writing. I tell them, this is the one time a week where you guys choose what you're learning. Yeah. Great. That's excellent. But the so what's your school like in supporting him? Does your school have open ears, and do they try to give you support with him? No. Not really. Nothing at all. I don't get anything from my school. There's nothing. Well, how would you describe the school? Is it an international school? Is it a state school, or what sort of? It's a private school that has an international program. Okay. Yeah. So the curriculum's like fixed, but really they just kind of do what they want. And normally a lot of the parents that enroll their kids in the international program want a more Western style approach. But yeah. So is it following because mine follows a blend of US, mostly US, but also some UK and a sprinkle of Chinese curriculum, but most of it's US. Sounds the same, yeah. So I teach all the US stuff. My Chinese co-teacher has 3 classes a week where she does British English, and then they've got the Chinese curriculum is mainly maths, but they do science and English and stuff. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay, so what have you got for him? Representation. Yep. Kevin's ADHD and focus normally means that he answers questions wrong because he doesn't read the full question all the way to the end. He's only reading part of the question and he's rushing to go and do the answer. So for this part, I thought it may be beneficial to represent different parts of the question in different colors on his worksheets or on his tests to show the clear parts of the question that it's necessary to see and for him to answer. I just thought that was a different visual aid he could use.
Yeah.
And when we go through his work, he notices his grammar mistakes once I point them out. So he'll say like, he do not run. And I'll be like, and I'll circle it and I'll be like, what? And he'll go, oh, he does not run. So he knows the answer.
Yeah.
So I thought he's just rushing too much to get through his paper. So he makes careless, what I would call careless mistakes. So I asked him to check his work and he says he does. I don't know if he does, but I was thinking maybe could provide him with 2 different color pens. So one blue and one green. I mean, he has different color pens. So
Yep.
tell him, look, the blue one is for writing and the green one is for checking. So once you finish your work, go through it again. And I want you to see corrections with the green pen. And if there's
Good.
no green, then I'll know, look, he probably hasn't checked his work. So
Okay.
hopefully over time, the amount of green pen he's using will become less and less. But it's just, again, about self-reflection and different colors and different visualization to help him take his time, maybe, or just,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really, it's a different task. By giving him a different color pen, it's a second task that he's moved on to. Maybe, I don't know. Like I
Yeah.
said, this is
Sure.
all theory. These are things I want to try and put into action. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I given a well, I thought I don't know
Yes.
whether it's an opinion or a thought. He reminds me of another student that I've got called Benjamin. He did a lot of his early education in Hong Kong, but he's in mainland now. And his English levels are great. You know, he's got far exceeds his conversational fluency in English than the other kids. And he's mad on science. He in his spare time he reads science magazines and things like that. He's more into science than I am, right? And he knows some areas, and he likes to challenge me. Blah blah blah. Anyway, I don't want to. We're taking. I don't want to take too much time on him. But he feels like he's above grade 4 level. Okay, basically. And I had a parent conference once, which was not a special one; it was just a routine one. And his father came up to me and he said, because he was getting commonly proficient, but none of it was outstanding, exceptional. There's no E's in there. And his father said he's clearly knows a lot more about science than grade. He was in grade 3 at that point. In the grade 3, do you think he can be accelerated and at least his science work on more advanced? And I said, but the problem is he's not submitting good enough work. I know it's in his brain, but he's rushing it because he's so obsessed with what he's, and all he wants to do is dump it all onto the page. He makes grammar mistakes. His writing is messy. And as far as, that is concerned, what I'd love to do is make a deal between him and you, the father, that if he can produce, what he should be capable of, then we can talk about that. But we can't even talk about it until then. So the father was brought into it. So his father then took that home with him and said, do you think you can do that? Can we make a deal? Can you produce more thorough, slow your work down, for Mr. Reifman? So that you can we want to see consistent, outstanding work before, because he wanted to be upgraded. So a similar, different situation in a lot of the ways, but it was interesting to see his work and his focus actually did rise for a fair while until his father, he slipped back a bit now since the COVID lockdown here. But for a long time there, he was actually, trying harder to get more serious about, what he was submitting to me.
Okay. It's just, I've asked Kevin, what's your favorite subject? Or what do you like doing? And it's always, he hates maths. That's all he tell me. But I'm like, what do you like? I don't know. Playing video games. I'm like, we can't do that in the classroom. I'm sure there's places in Australia and Montessori style schools where you can do that, but I can't really do that. And that actually kind of takes me onto my action and expression, because our hands kind of are tied over the framework that we have to operate in school and how I can have students report on their grades. And like I said before, the school demands a monthly test in a strict format. Weekly quizzes are based on the content. I change these quizzes each week. We'll have an oral one week, and then a listening, and then a written one. So they do change. And Kevin scores highly and he can express himself orally perfectly. but as I mentioned, he struggles with the writing, and 75% of his final grade includes some form of writing, whether it's listening and writing down, or reading and writing, or just writing.
Yep.
So I was thinking maybe of what you were saying about giving them like a teacher role. And I wonder if a little bit more responsibility could have Kevin control his disruptive behavior by maybe at first pairing him with one kid, rather than putting him in like a class teacher role, but pairing him with a student of lesser ability.
Yeah.
And hopefully giving him some action in class besides just listening to me, but he's now got another role. It might take some trial and error because he's not very patient. So I don't know how he'd handle being with a student of lesser ability.
Sure.
I used to allow Kevin 1 minute of out the class walking or reading, but even that I was told I'm not allowed to do anymore. Like, you know what I mean? So how can I help Kevin when the school won't recognize his his learning abilities, or they won't allow me to differentiate and treat him with a certain skills? But I'm hoping I want to try him in this teacher style role, and
I think that's a good step.
3 or 4 things I've mentioned through the UDLs.
Yeah,
I hope to see. I mean, I've got 3 more months with Kevin. I'll see what it does.
Could you have more discussion with the parents as well, though? Would they be good to bring them into it, maybe?
I think that is something I could try and do, because his mum speaks very good English. I just don't have much contact with the parents because they board. So the kids are in school, so the parents don't have much impact with the kids. I'll see his mum this Friday actually, because they're going home for the holiday, so I could talk to her then.
Yeah. Do you do much with parents in general?
No, that's handled by the co-teacher. They keep us away from the parents. Really.
Oh, really? Because I was always kind of, I won't say scared, but always a bit apprehensive to open that can of worms that might be starting to, talk to the parents. And I got to a point with online where I needed to. And I found that rather than being the monsters that I kind of imagined them to be, the parents were 99% of the time very supportive and very just willing to help in whichever way they could. It was a really refreshing, kind of a thing for me. And I talk to the parents much more these days. It was next year I'm going to a different school. I'm going to be a homeroom teacher that'll have 25 kids rather than 50 kids I've got now over 3 rooms. One of the first things I'm going to do for sure is try to establish some kind of relationship with the parents.
Yeah, I think next year I'll try to get added to the WeChat group that they're.
I think it's worthwhile.
Yeah. But anyway, that's all I've got about Kevin and a few different things. So I think I've overshot my time a little bit.
That's good. I think it's a good discussion. I hope that it's not overshot for both of us, but I think we've had a good discussion, and I'll get on to mine now then.
Yes, go for it.
I'm happy to just keep this same, file running the whole time. I hope
that's okay. Definitely. We can both just submit this recording.
Yeah. All right. So, interestingly, my student, I've also given him a fake name, and the fake name I gave mine was also Kevin. Kevin must be the, like the stereotypical fake name.
Maybe, yeah.
Anyway, so my Kevin, should I try to change it? Maybe I'll try to say Stephen, another fake name.
It's okay.
All right, I'll call him Kevin then. Kevin is a grade 4 student studying in my bilingual international school in Shenzhen, China. His English language skills are very low, which makes any classes difficult in this school, which is mostly using English as a first language in most of the classes. And also most of the students are able to speak some level of fluency in English. So he really is at a disadvantage. Not all the students can, but most of them can. The other thing with Kevin is he's also quite weak in Chinese as well. So that makes it doubly hard for him, because he doesn't even get a lot of help from the Chinese co-teachers or anything, because he struggles to understand them in Chinese Mandarin. Now, it took myself and his other teachers a while to come to the bottom of it. And what the main reason was, because his parents pulled him out of school when COVID hit, and he had a year and a half at home alone. And he wasn't getting anything from anyone. And he wasn't given a chance to catch up with his peers. The school accepted him as he was, and he was put back into his age group again. But developmentally, academically, and socially, he was at least a year behind everybody else. And I think that realistically, I don't think he was. I think he was already a little bit regressed, even before then. So what we see is a student that can't really speak English, has trouble with Mandarin, and he switches between, in his kind of frustration, I guess, he switches between attempting to be a class clown, which doesn't work most of the time and annoys other students, or just disrupting other students. So this has also turned him into really quite an outcast, in his class as well. He's avoided a lot. No one wants to go anywhere near him.
Yeah.
So you can see how, this boy, and he's hard to teach, really. He's disengaged in every way. So after a lot of work, we did actually get full support from the school, which was fantastic. We have some workers helping him with basically following from classroom to classroom, now giving language and learning support. That's both English and Mandarin, that most classes he goes to. He's getting some social support, but nowhere near enough. And he needs this at least as much as he does with the literacy side of things. Now, from my point of view as a STEM teacher, that's one of the times where he doesn't get that support. His language and his learning support staff go on a break when he's at STEM, because they're not as focused on him engaging and in STEM as what they are in the literacy classes. So I've been doing what I can, and following some UDL methods. One of the first things was to really ascertain what makes him tick. What is he engaged in? How can I communicate with him? Sure. And how can he get feedback? How can I get some accessible material back from him? And one of the great things in the class, because most of the kids are great, they know the struggle. They're part of the struggle. Yeah. And they support, even if you would think that kids could get kind of semi-jealous because this kid gets special treatment, because he can basically, I've got some other activities like games and things, like more quizzes, game-based sort of, and hands-on learning for him that the other kids aren't doing. But they kind of support that, because they know that if he's kept busy, that means that he's annoying them less, as well.
Something disrupting the class for sure. How many kids would you have in Kevin's class?
In his classes, there's 16 in total.
16. So and it's just you in the classroom, or are you and another member of staff?
Sorry. Oh no, there's a co-teacher with me, but she's not really engaged. She's very experienced. She steps in when she needs to. But she's generally sort of pretty standoffish, and she's happy with me, doing most of the work on my own, which is okay.
And do you find when you set Kevin off to do his own separate tasks, will he just crack on, or will he be trying to join in with the rest of the class?
Depending on what they are. So one of the things that he's got is so you can engage him, but he's got a very short attention span, and he gets kind of mentally tired really quickly too. So he's almost like like preps, they've got very short attention spans. You can only sort of break the learning tasks down to 2 or 3 minutes at a time, whereas the older kids can be 5, 10, maybe even 15 minutes. So he's got more like a prep level, PY level attention span and mental focus sort of, time frame. So what he'll do is I'll try to sort of get him on the core, what I want him to know most, or what I want to get him to get from him most. That's going to take no more than 2 or 3 minutes, because I know I'll lose him after that. Yeah. And then I kind of let him just go. His favorite thing in class is reading graphic novels, comics and graphic novels. So then he'll just go off and read a graphic novel and that kind of thing until I've got the next sort of, task for him. So yeah, do you have any?
It's funny because I as you had a similar kid to my Kevin, I have a very similar kid to your Kevin.
Yeah, right.
Leo, who before COVID, according to his other teachers, was very sweet and smart, and he's still very smart, you can see that, but his behavior was totally different. Since he's come back, he clearly didn't keep up with the lessons online, and he's
Yep.
fell behind. And I don't think he did anything really except play computer games. I know his home life is very stressful at the moment. His dad's very ill, but yeah, he didn't have much adult supervision, I think, during that COVID time. So he fell behind his class, got used to not working hard, and has come back and refuses to work hard to catch up. And yeah, spends a lot of his time rather just reading graphic novels in class or being extremely disruptive. And
Very similar then.
I was wondering if there was some sort of developmental behavior disability, but it sounds like he's just not been taught. He has fallen behind socially and intellectually to his peers, and he's just acting out over that.
That's right. Yeah, I think that is. I mean, he may well have a learning disability that's undiagnosed as well, but
I think that I'm not in a position to diagnose that, unfortunately.
No, I can't diagnose it. No, and nobody else in the school has kind of put anything on him either. Even the most experienced teachers have said we don't really know if there's anything there apart from just lack of contact with people for so long, you know, and just, you know, and his parents are divorced too, which doesn't help. So it's a bit of a tug of war. So there's this kind of, the parents are trying to play favorites with him, so they kind of spoil him as well, which doesn't help. So there's some,
that ties into what Hattie was saying about the stable home life as well.
That's right. His home life is anything but stable. Yeah. So just, exactly. So, you know, I'm in a position to I can probably provide more hands-on and game sort of, you know, learning experiences for him than some of the other teachers can. And I'm taking advantage of that. So I'm, even though he's very difficult for me, I do see small steps. And one of the interesting things is as bad as he is on the days that he's just rolling around on the floor, you know, totally disengaged. And I might be doing something like, a vocabulary lesson or something like that, and then we'll do a quiz based on how much of the vocabulary was retained like a week later or whatever. It's amazing how much he gets right as well. So even though he's actually totally not there from what everybody can see, he's still got, there's still enough lights on in there for him to be able to kind of, because it's not just words, we're drawing diagrams, you know, it's all visual, you know, as well, to get the vocabulary, and he does then give me a gradable, you know, some gradable material that I can then give him a low level pass, you know, for, because he's actually quite accurate when it comes to that, whereas the other classes, the literature classes, they're just failing him on everything because he doesn't give them anything. He's just, you know, nothing submitted, you know, sort of fails. Yeah. So it's so research. So when I'm looking at the UDL now, because I've never seen UDL before, but I think that it's nice to be reading that because it's reinforcing, you know, some of the strategies that are in place. And it's nice to see whenever there is some small steps of progress, but you know, like all of these kind of case study students, progress is still difficult and slow, isn't it?
Yeah. Sometimes you can't see it until you look back at it on the end of the year.
That's right. Yeah.
Compare their work from the beginning to the end. Yeah,
for sure. But interestingly, his parents are satisfied with the job that we're doing with him, you know, in the school as well. So it's kind of funny with that, because we don't feel like we're collectively as a school and as a teacher group, you know, gaining much traction with him, but the parents have an attitude, you're doing better than anybody else, you know, that we've you know, tried him with. So yeah, and that's about me for the case study.
Excellent. Yeah, that's interesting. What was there? I was going to add something at the end. It's gone in my head. Nope, that's okay. That's fine.
All right.
Thank you very much. All right.
Thank you. That was really, it was quite a good fun, good conversation. We're way over time, I'm sure, but anyway.
Yes, definitely. But oh well. Were you recording also?
No, so when I gave you the host, I don't think I was able to record.
Oh, okay.
Oh no, there was too. Sorry, there is.
Oh.
Record on this computer. Now I can see it.
Probably, I think this recording will be too big for WeChat and have to be compressed. So I can probably send it you on Google Docs. And
okay.
Because I assume you'll have to submit it as well for your.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, if you could try that, and even if you even if you need to break it up, I can probably stitch it together again.
Okay, yeah, no problem. All right.
If
Well,
that's
yeah. Go, what were you
yeah,
saying?
sorry about that. I should have been recording too. I think this is the learning curve of using Zoom as well.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, I'll stop the recording for now.
All right. Thanks, Joel.